What is up, my brothers from another mother and those handful of rational sisters out there? So I've been requested to do a video on my experience and view of politics. I don't usually talk about politics. I was always left feeling that politics and religion are something you just don't go on about. But I feel the need to comment on this because I have got a good deal of experience dealing with politicians and bureaucrats. I'll get into the story in a minute, but let me start with my view, I guess my blue pill lens of how I viewed government as a youngster. So I've grown up in Canada, obviously. I was born in England. We immigrated here when I was a very young age, probably about 4, in and around there. And whenever we traveled outside of Canada when I was small, we didn't go very far. We did maybe road trips down to Florida. Americans would always say to us, "Oh, you're Canadian. That must be amazing because you've got a great country to live in and free healthcare." And our free healthcare is called, I think it's a health card now, but it was called when I was younger, OHIP, Ontario Health Insurance Plan or something like that. And I was always led to believe that I was very privileged to live in this amazing country called Canada where we would get free healthcare and they would take very good care of you. I was always left with the impression that government is good and you should trust government because they give you things like free health care and look after us. But my experience changed as I got older. What I saw and what I experienced through all of these conversations that I had with politicians and bureaucrats when I had to do some lobbying, which I'll explain later, changed my lens and my view. When I needed to use the healthcare system for things like I had appendicitis and I needed to get my appendix out, and I saw that it took like 6 or 7 hours for me to even see a qualified health practitioner or to even get painkillers I was literally curled up in a ball barfing on the floor in front of the hospital waiting to get health care, or any of the other small incidents that I might have had. Not a lot, probably about 1 or 2 through my life where I needed health care. I'll tell you about another one. I actually had to go to the emergency room once from a ski accident, and I thought I'd broken my leg, and I had broken my thumb for sure because I had to cast it. But the waiting time for getting any kind of health care was brutal. I sat there for, I can't remember how long, it seemed like 5 or 6 hours on this incident as well. And people flock to emergency rooms here because of our free and amazing government provided health care, where you just wait. If a mom feels like their child is dying of some kind of rare disease because they have a red dot on their back or sniffles once, they go to the emergency room and they're in line in front of you. Unless you're having a heart attack or you're bleeding out on the floor, you've got to wait. I at the time had a broken thumb and thought my leg was broken, my shin was broken. So I'm sitting there waiting, and when I got called in many hours later, there was a kid that was ahead of me. I say a kid, he was probably about 20, but there was a young man ahead of me that was sitting beside me, and the nurse said, he was one step ahead of me, and the nurse said, not the nurse, the doctor said, "Why are you here? What can I do for you?" He goes, "I can't feel my legs." And she said, "Well, why not?" He said, "Well, I was sitting there playing World of Warcraft on a raid all night for 24 hours, and when I got up, I couldn't feel my legs." And she said, "For the love of God, get up and move around and exercise." So, government is not always great. Government doesn't always, set up the best policies and procedures to take care of its citizens. With the blue pill lens that I had viewed in life, I had later on in life seen that, things like healthcare, I would actually prefer to pay out of my own pocket. I would rather pay per use. And I understand there's going to be people that are going to say that, well, it's not feasible or viable for everybody out in the world, but there's got to be a better system than, moms taking their kids to the emergency room when they have a red dot on their back because they sniffled. I'm not even kidding. That's, that happened. Or the kid that was playing World of Warcraft for 24 hours and is eating up tools and resources that taxpayers are paying for, when you've got a guy in there with a broken thumb, potentially broken leg that was bleeding. So that was my experience on the healthcare side of things. I want to talk more deeply about government and their policies and procedures and how much they care about the citizens of the world. I run a debt negotiation business. If you guys have been watching my channel for a while, you already know that. Let me tell you about a period of time, it was a few years ago, where my perspective completely changed on government. And I'll let you know what I think of the political parties here in Canada as well. Anyway, there was a bill that was introduced to Parliament that would change the way that our industry could operate. Not a very big industry, very boutique. There was probably less than 7 or 8 companies like mine at the time. The introduction of the bill pretty much wiped out all of them except for 2. But the bill was introduced because our company saves people money and gets them out of debt in a fashion that's more friendly to their credit report, gives them more control and access to their money, and allows them to save more. Now, these are all things that the banks, credit card companies don't want, so they started making up stories about why our industry was bad, why we were bad players. You know, they would cherry pick random stories that were not consistent with like the experience of 99% of people's processes. They would go through it, and they started basically lobbying and pitching the government. They would hire a very high-profile financial commentator. If you live in Canada, you know who Gail Vass-Oxlade is. She did a bunch of TV shows and books and things like that. And they used her as a spokesperson at different events and media topics, pandering to the public's view of these people are doing bad, they're harming, they're doing more harm than good. We've got to legislate and regulate them. So my industry banded together and we hired a lobbyist group which we could barely afford. Collectively, we spent about $45,000, maybe $50,000 over the course of a few years trying to get in front of these politicians and bureaucrats. In Canada, we've got the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, and the New Democrat Party, which are the main parties here. The New Democrat's more socialist. And they all, you know, if you're watching this from anywhere in the world, you're probably familiar with politics when it comes to, you know, conservative values and liberal values and socialist values. So just look at it that way. And they all pretty much behaved in the same way. My representative that brought us in front of all these meetings was shocked. They used to work in the government offices, was shocked when we started presenting the evidence contrary to what the big banks, credit card companies were presenting, which confirmed that there's value in what we do. It saves people money. It helps protect their credit rating. It gives them choice, you know, and avoid bankruptcy. And it got to the end of it where we quickly discovered that they didn't care about any of that. The government just didn't give a damn about the consumer, the Canadian citizen, or anything. And it seemed like, we couldn't find any evidence of it, but it seemed like almost like the credit card companies were greasing them and paying them under the table somehow. Because when the evidence was presented to them, it was clear and concise to the point where even these ex-government employees that are now working as lobbyists were saying, you pass this bill, you might as well call it the Credit Card Profit Protection Act, because that's all you're going to do. You're going to keep more people in debt, make getting out of debt more expensive, and ruin more credit ratings. So, my experience with government is not the greatest. I'm not fond of politics and politicians, bureaucrats. They're all full of shit in my experience. Somebody once sent me a meme that said something like, you know, same shit, different pile, different smell, you know, just, you know, pick your poison because they're all pretty much the same. Big government is unnecessary in my view. We don't need more government burning through money. They're completely irresponsible with how they manage it. I'll give you a very good example. It was a recent press piece in Toronto here where the local municipal government quoted several $100,000 to install steps in the entrance to a municipal park. Something that a resident found out about, an old man that was retired that had woodworking skills. He found out about this and he went and built the steps. I think it was for like $70. I believe the total savings, I can't remember, was something like a few $100,000. It was massive though, it was dramatic. And then the city had to come in and tear out the steps because they claimed them or deemed them to be unsafe. Okay, this is an Eastern European craftsman that worked with his hands all of his life with wood and built perfect steps, and the government comes in and rips them out because they need to justify their position, they need to justify their budget, they need to justify their existence. I'm not fond of it, you know, truth be told. With respects to the different political parties and their views and value system, they all care about themselves. They only care about getting reelected and voted back in. I think that something my dad told me a number of years ago still holds true. He basically said, Richard, you know, son, if you're going to vote vote on a conservative platform because they're least likely to fuck things up. They're all a bunch of crooks. They're all a bunch of criminals, in my opinion. That's been my experience as well. I'd really love to hear your view, guys. Leave a comment below. I don't know how much further to go down this rabbit hole than just leave it at that. I am just not fond of government and what they do and how they use money and how they tax the crap out of people. Tax, in my opinion, is theft, the way they tax people, especially high income earners. You know, I've paid so much money in taxes, I've probably paved this entire highway that I'm driving on right now. It's almost sickening when you take a look at things like that. Anyway, got a call coming in. I'm gonna leave it at that in this video. Talk to you guys later. Peace.